Okay, welcome everyone to Theology Thursday. Last episode of the year. Last episode of 2020. You're having an odd reaction to that spindrift. That's your favorite. That's your favorite of the bubble waters, is it not?
Now, these bubble waters are the next level because most carbonated waters, they use artificial flavors. But see here, this can right here. It says real fruit tastes better. And then it lets you know that they squeezed like a quarter of a lemon, a real lemon into this.
And it gets a bad rap because it has some calories.
Yeah.
But like literally like 4 or 5,
Yeah,
right?
It's got 3.
Yeah, there you go.
It's got 3.
Oh, man. So cool to see everybody already here. This is, before we got on, are you trying to get another sponsor? It just hit me. I don't think
to go to the camera
Spindrift
and focus on the face in the can.
It's really good.
It actually is good.
It's so refreshing.
I will say though, man, Spindrift of all the companies does not need our help. You know what?
They're pricey. They're like 25% more.
They could use a leg up on LaCroix and Bubbles or Bubbly or whatever it's called. So before we got on, we were talking about Boys to Men Christmas songs, and some of you guys would be really surprised to know the depth of Isaac's knowledge of the catalog of Boys to Men.
It's true.
I sang one line from a Boys to Men Christmas song.
Yes.
And Isaac immediately said the year it was from, which was 1993, and then listed like the next 2 albums after that.
Yeah, I listed the album name, the year, and the prior album and the subsequent album.
Because the subsequent album was the one that...
The big one. It was called 2. It went diamond. Back in the day, you actually sold something, they were like called physical copies of music. And there were CDs and cassettes, and it sold 10 million of them.
So retro. Kevin, you probably had some of this.
Yeah, so explain how, so you put like the cassette or CD
into
what?
Your iPod.
You put like the iPhone had
into your iPod. That's back when they had the true Sony Walkman.
I had a Discman with 45 seconds of skip protection, so you could carry it in your cargo pants pocket when you walked around.
Yes, so the skip protection was a big deal because... Like, if you try to go on a jog with no skip protection, it just
ruined your entire CD. Hey, great to see you guys. As I said at the beginning, this is the last episode of 2020. We got a bunch of stuff going on in Christmas that's going to take extra attention. Plus, Isaac's got a baby coming in the next few weeks. So with that in mind, we're going to take a few weeks off here. We'll be back in January. In the meantime, one thing I'd love to request of you guys is if you have stuff that you would like to see us talk about on Theology Thursday, I would love to hear that from you. So you could put that in the comments or email me if there's things you'd like to, just individual theological like questions or subjects or whatever. Let me know.
If you want me to do like a survival show, that's what I'd really like to do. I've been practicing friction fires.
I mean, clearly we're both into that because we're both wearing Columbia outdoor shirts right now.
Yeah.
You went full PFG with yours. That's performance
fishing gear. Yeah,
this is like the fake. This is like for I mean, I backpack.
So I just want to say though that Columbia clothing is the best clothing that I have ever worn. It's comfortable.
You can fit a spindrift in each of your front pockets.
And look they got these little like. In case you're fishing, where are they? There's like little things, so if you get tired of holding your fishing pole, you could actually like hook it up to your shirt.
For
and
real?
It just stays there. Yeah. I've never done that because a real fisherman would never put his pole down.
There's so much in that sentence you just said for me to talk about. I'm not going to do any of it.
It's true, though. It's like, what if you get a bite? You're going to miss the bite. Because you ever see people at the beach, they have their poles.
Yeah, they're like asleep in a chair.
And there's a reason why you've never seen any of those people pull up a fish.
Because if the striper you've been waiting for all day actually decides to grab while you're asleep in your chair, it's not happening.
That circle hook's not going to help you.
So, all right. Enough of whatever this is. Tonight, we're doing sort of a Christmas Q&A. We got a few questions from you guys. The first question is the one that we're going to spend probably the majority of our time on. It's the most pressing one that comes up year after year after year.
Absolutely.
But we got a couple other questions after that if we have time. But the first one is the biggest one, and it's is or is not Christmas based on pagan holidays? Is it just a kind of like co-opting of old pagan holidays and Christianizing them? And the answer, as most questions worth answering, is pretty complicated. Unfortunately, the way people treat this is not like giving real weight to how complicated it really is. It's like everything else. It's like tweets and memes and people just blanketly asserting things. So we actually have some memes. Kevin, if you could throw up that first one. Many of you probably see these year after year, things like this one, the famous Morpheus meme. What if I told you Christmas is not associated with Christianity? Which that sentence has so many problems with it, I don't even know where to start.
It's
not associated with Christianity, person who made this meme. Jesus Christ was not born on December 25th, statement 2. It is an ancient pagan festivity called Saturnalia, honoring the sun and marking the winter solstice. So we could have, and now I'm thinking almost should have, just grabbed that meme and had the whole episode be us addressing each line of it. But we're just going to move on. Throw up the next one. It's another very similar one. This is the famous Kermit sipping a cup of tea. He says, Christmas is celebrating the birth of a Jewish savior 6 months off his actual birth date. So the person who made this meme thinks they know when Jesus was born, which is interesting. On a holiday borrowed from paganism, using pagan tradition, but that's none of my business. And then one more, because this one's actually pretty funny. These yard signs popped up in Florida a couple years ago saying Mithras is the reason for the season. Happy winter solstice. So do you see stuff like this regularly? I mean, like around Christmas time?
Yes, especially online. You see it and people saying it. And it's similar to like one thing we've always talked about, like someone will say, they'll act like I've done my historical research, and don't you know Christianity was invented by Constantine,
right?
At the Council of Nicaea.
Yeah, and you go like what? I don't even know where to start. And that is kind of the case here, where it's what you see is not carefully reasoned arguments, but like assertions. And even, when I was looking at different kind of doing some research on this, like you'll see an article on like abcnews.com that just as part of what they're saying about Christmas, they'll be like, it was based on the pagan tradition of Saturnalia, blah, blah, blah. Or they'll say, another common one is that Christmas trees were a, Germanic pagan practice from the 16th century. And there's no link even. So it's just something that people assert without proof. And so we're going to kind of walk through some of the arguments around this and eventually answer the question, because it's not, in my opinion, just up front, it's not a simple yes or no to are there pagan origins to the Christmas celebrations.
Yeah, we would say that the Christmas story is unique and true.
Right.
But certainly the Christian claim is that all the ways we celebrate Christmas are derived from the Bible directly.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Very few, if any, Christians are making that claim that you're going to find like a drummer boy or a Christmas tree in the Bible. So we'll start, so we've got December 25th, the date. That's part of the claim that people make. We've got all these other characters like Mithras, who we saw. We'll talk about him. His name's actually Mithras. And then, a bunch of other stuff. We'll just kind of walk through it. So December 25th is the first one. You'll hear various claims, one of which, like that yard sign, is that this is the birthday of Mithras, a Roman god. It's actually more complicated than that. He's a Roman god, but he was also in Persian. I was going to say Iranian, but Persian at the time that he was worshipped. Persian god. It's complicated how gods kind of migrate around the world. Another one is that it's the birthday of Sol Invictus, which is a name of a possible Roman solar deity, a sun god, of which there were many, or the celebration that's called Saturnalia, which was a celebration of Saturn, the god Saturn. So maybe we could start we'll talk about Mithras first, because this is the claim that gets made the most, and it's also the one that has, in my opinion, the least historical backing behind it. So maybe we could talk generally about all of these kind of claims that get made, because Mithras is one of those pagan gods where you will find books and YouTube videos and memes and everything claiming that Mithras is an equivalent to Jesus, that Mithras is this god worshipped in Rome who, has all the same stuff. He's born of a virgin. He had 12 disciples. When he was born, there were shepherds in attendance at his birth. I'm trying to think what else. He died and resurrected. And those kind of statements are made all the time. They're made about him. They're made about other gods like Horus, and tons of other ones. So many of you have probably heard these claims that like Jesus is actually just an amalgamation of all these different pagan gods. So what general thoughts do you have about this?
It's something that you've said. You've emphasized finding original source material. So if someone says, well, don't you know this deity in the 2nd century BC was worshipped like this? Find the documents, the source material, where there's a 2nd century deity worship like that. Because if you have a 8th century historical reference
Right.
to someone doing something that occurred in the 2nd century that might have occurred 200 years before, you don't really have an argument.
Right.
And that's how a lot of these things work. A lot.
Yeah, and a term we'll use over and over again that we should define up front is the term primary source.
Yeah.
When we say primary source, what we mean is a source from the time period saying that this actually happened. Even that's not like dead-on proof of something. But if you're saying something happened in the 1st century,
especially if it's contemporary, so if it happens at the same time, you might find a parallel, but you don't know who's copying who.
exactly,
You have no idea.
you really want something that predates the other thing
by a significant
by
margin,
a significant amount,
and then doesn't have parallels that can be explained by other reasons.
right?
So, for instance, we'll probably get into this, but there's a reason why tons of cultures celebrate holidays around the winter solstice.
right. Yeah, great example. I mean, like one super famous Old Testament example is the Epic of Gilgamesh has a flood story. And so there's a very simplistic argument that goes, well, the Epic of Gilgamesh has a flood story, so obviously whoever wrote the book of Genesis stole the flood story from Gilgamesh. And tons of other ancient Near Eastern sources have a flood story, where a honestly simpler explanation might be maybe there was a massive cataclysmic flood that all these ancient Near Eastern cultures were aware of that made its way into many of their stories. So all that to say, primary sources are incredibly important. They're still not even like dead-on proof of something. And in the case of Mithras, there's almost nothing. We know almost nothing about the Roman god Mithras.
Yeah, all the claims are made. You can check me, but it's like his birth. He was born coming out of a rock naked with a sword or dagger in hand or something
fully
like that.
formed. He's a fully formed adult who came. And even that, there's nothing even really written about that. We just have sculptures of him like coming out of a rock.
Mm-hmm.
There's a really famous sculpture of him killing a bull. That's the most famous thing about Mithras. He killed a bull.
Mm-hmm.
And again, without getting too far into the weeds, there's a Persian god named Mithra, and there's a Roman god named Mithras, and it's not clear how they're related. The Persian one is older, but he's not even... the Persian god is like a god of contracts and treaties, totally unrelated. Mithras,
I would not like that guy.
you wouldn't have liked him?
No, that sounds like the god of crossword puzzles or something.
He's
like
the god of like, he'll come after
Sudoku
you if you
and-
break a contract. You know what I mean?
No, we don't like him.
Not a fan. Yeah, and so here's the short version without getting way too detailed. People make all of these claims about Mithras specifically and about many other pagan deities, saying all these things parallel Jesus. And there are, I mean, with Mithras, we'll just use him as the example because he's the Christmas one. There's literally not a single primary source that says he was born of a virgin. In fact, he has some vague origin stories that are nothing like that. He did not have 12 disciples, even though people say that. There's nothing that says that anywhere. He did not have shepherds attend his birth, even though people say that one too. There's like, it's not even like there's something sort of like that. There's nothing.
Yeah.
He did not die and resurrect. We don't know how or when he died. And most importantly, for the sake of Christmas, there's no narrative about his birth. There's no date associated with his birth at all. In fact, if you follow like modern Zoroastrian associations with Mithras, his veneration time period is in the middle of July. It's like July 16th or something. So again, the short
People just make it up.
and people
say-
just say it.
And it's something that there's nothing new under the sun. It's something that happens often is you'll see this online today. Somebody will say something, and if it sounds good, someone will share
Yeah.
it, and then it's shared again. And then all of a sudden it's been shared 1,000 times. And at a certain point in a certain subculture, a group of people, it almost becomes just accepted knowledge. And in reality, it's someone just made it up. And this, by the way, can happen. I've seen this happen with preaching. Like someone makes a good preaching point 30 years ago and says that one of the keys, the historical details to making this up is this. And then all of a sudden, another preacher heard it and liked it. And then someone heard it. And then you're just repeating this thing over and over again. It's like not true. So the most famous example immediately comes to mind is Jesus says it's more difficult for a rich man to go to heaven than for a camel to go through the eye of a needle. And someone along the line said that there's actually archaeological evidence that city walls had a hole in them, and they call it the eye of the needle, and the camel would have to bend his neck down
And get on his knees.
to get into the city walls. And so
You
what
go, oh
Jesus
my gosh,
is saying is,
he has to bow.
yeah, you have to bow. But it's like, there's no evidence for that. The closest thing you have is like some medieval city wall castle where there's a hole for animals to pass through. But in the first century Jewish world, what did Jesus mean? He meant it's really hard if you're wealthy to get to heaven, because your greed can overtake you to such a degree that you worship money more than him.
Yeah.
And you know that because the disciples immediately said,
Then who can be saved?
well, then who can be saved? And the disciples who said that weren't filthy rich by the standards of their day. So they just immediately were like, then who can be saved? And Jesus, of course, responds with God, all things are possible. But I've heard that eye of the needle thing in sermons like
hundreds of times,
all the time, and it's just not true.
No, and so you have to be really careful. I mean, like those yard signs say Mithras is the reason for the season. It's a blind assertion that actually, December 25th is a celebration of Mithras' birthday.
I watch History Channel.
Right.
I know about secret aliens.
And it's funny that my favorite source that I read on this was a guy who has a blog called History for Atheists. He's a classical atheist who really examined all the evidence, and basically his conclusion, he's an atheist, and his conclusion is like, you guys, we can't do this. Like, if you don't have real evidence, don't make these claims. So here's the cautionary story here. If you don't have primary evidence, be really, really careful and be really, really skeptical. And so don't, like Isaac said, in our culture, it's sort of like if something aligns with what you want to think, you just buy it. And there's actually a paper trail on this stuff that proves that. There was a, really famously, when I was in high school, I guess, there was a movie that came out on YouTube called Zeitgeist Film. It was huge and made, all of these same kind of, it wasn't about Christmas, but it made all these claims that like Jesus and Osiris and Horus and Mithras and all these gods are all actually the same story. And widely believed, people lost their faith over this movie.
You were in high school. I was in youth ministry then. I'm a few years older than you. And kids were coming to like, oh my gosh, Christianity is just a copy.
Yeah.
We've just stole from all these other gods, because they said he's born of a virgin. He had 12 disciples. The shepherds were out of birth. He was crucified and resurrected, and it was a big deal. Zeitgeist,
and then
film.
Later, Bill Maher repeated all of those same things on his movie Religulous that he made. Not all of them, many of them. And you look at it, and the only citations for these things, they're citing books written like contemporary books. The oldest one is the really famous book, The 16 Crucified Saviors.
13 or is it 16?
16.
Okay, 16.
And that's from 1875. So it's not old. And that one was actually written by somewhat of a scholar, but he didn't reference actual primary documents.
I think he just made stuff, honestly, just made stuff up. So you had contemporary people referencing and being influenced by a book written 100 years ago and just accepting it as truth.
Yeah.
And it's not true at all, like in any way.
Yeah.
And whenever there's similarities, which there's bound to be similarities between stories. I mean, you can find similarities between Justice League and the Avengers type of thing. But they're easily explained, and the biggest connections are just completely made up. It's not true.
And that's important to realize for Christmas too, that it's sort of like, okay, this pagan holiday had gift giving associated with it. So clearly, like what holiday doesn't have gift giving associated with it, right? And so the big takeaway here is that the similarities between Mithraism and Christianity and Mithras and Jesus have been greatly exaggerated to the point of just making stuff up. And you should not believe that when you hear it. And again, if somebody makes that claim, the easiest thing to do, don't feel like you have to regurgitate everything we said tonight. Just say, how do you know that? Like, can you show me some evidence of that?
Yeah.
Because most people can't. Now, moving on to Sol Invictus, this one's interesting because it's a holiday we don't know very much about. It was a Roman holiday, the kind of Sol Invictus birthday. Sol Invictus means indestructible sun. And this was a deity, again, that we don't know much about. And this one also gets thrown around a lot because there is actually a document that talks about Sol Invictus's birthday being celebrated on December 25th. So you could stop there and be like, oh, dang, Christians did steal that. This is why you have to dig a level deeper. The document is from 354 AD. So that's actually, even though that's very old to us, that's not that old in terms of when you're talking about things that are competing with Christianity. 4th century is not that old. And so there's this 4th century document that talks about Sol Invictus' birthday being on the 25th, but that document also talks about the 25th being the day that Christians celebrate the birth of Jesus. Mm-hmm. So on the same document where it gets where people will make the claim like, hey, this is Christianity was copying this, it's also the oldest document we have saying that that's the day that Christians celebrated the birth of Jesus. So, again, just to say the same thing one more time, most of the kind of pagan solstice-based religious festivals, they're either not attested to at all in primary sources, because you hear this about Germanic celebrations too. It's like you either can't find primary sources, or they're just not that old. Mm. It'll be like the 4th century or later. So there's another one, again, I'm trying not to get into the weeds here, but there's a Germanic Yule celebration that people make all the same claims about Christian Christmas celebrations. And it's like there's an 8th century document referencing a 4th century document that's really vague. Mm-hmm. And you just have to know, if you know anything about history in these time periods, that doesn't mean anything. Like you just can't really base anything on that. So anyway, taking too long here because we got to get to the main candidate, which has the best case for it, which is Saturnalia. Saturnalia, Roman festival. It was held on December 17th. Maybe we should talk first about solstices and why that's important, because you mentioned that earlier.
Yeah. So essentially, at that time of the year, everyone knew it was the time period where the longest, darkest days had passed. So the sun was going to be more dominant, if you will. So, I mean, just symbolically in your calendar, you have the darkest time of the year has passed. So, of course, all throughout cultures, that's going to be something that's a big deal.
Right. And sun gods are prominent gods in almost every culture as well.
Huge. So think of it like daylight saving times. When we gain an extra hour of sunlight, most people are happy at that time.
Yeah.
Most people. I like it. I don't like when you get the benefit of the hour sleep, but then it's dark.
And dude, when you got toddlers, you don't get that hour sleep either.
Doesn't matter anyway. Exactly.
Nobody tells the 2-year-old that it's 5 a.m., not 6 a.m.
But it's like, it's there's a whole hour of, it could be bright outside till 8:15 now or whatever it is.
Yeah.
We all collectively know it. And so winter solstice was like that across many cultures. So it was a big deal. So you should be expecting many people and places to be honoring this time in such a way.
Yeah. And so Saturnalia is one example of that. And it's not December 25th, which is interesting. It's December 17th. It was very, very popular. And so it got extended and extended and extended. And I believe the farthest it ever got extended was December 21st or 22nd or something. So it actually never occurred on December 25th. Not that really matters, as we're going to say in a second. There were some things, like comparisons get made to modern Christmas celebrations, but honestly, they're pretty exaggerated. It's like they walked around singing songs, and you go like, oh, that sounds like Christmas, but they also did that naked, which we don't do today. And there's a bunch of really specific things they did that are not at all like Christmas. There's some evidence that there were gladiatorial games, which were borderline human sacrifice. There was, of course, like all Roman holidays, tons of sexual stuff going on. One really interesting thing they did is they would reverse the roles of masters and slaves. So like the master of the house would set the table and like serve a meal to the slave, which sounds really sweet. But if you dig into a little bit.
Yeah, sarcastic.
Exactly.
It wasn't like, let me serve you this time. It was like, I'm pretending to be you, my slave.
We're all making fun of the slave, right? And the slave doesn't have impunity to just do and say whatever he wants to his master.
Yeah,
he's next week.
Yeah, exactly.
By the way, I should say, I meant to say this up front. A lot of the material that I got for tonight relied heavily on a video made by Mike Winger, who makes really excellent,
really good, highly recommend
videos.
Mike Winger.
Huge fan of him. He makes he's a pastor who is a theologian and just does YouTube videos that are hugely successful, hugely popular, and does a really good job. Really well researched, and he has a few different Christmas videos that are helpful if you want to dig
you could just
deeper.
YouTube search Mike Winger. Does the show have a name? I forgot the name.
Kevin's probably going to Google it while we're talking, but I think it's just Mike Winger.
He's a good dude. I co-host a podcast called Regeneration Podcast. We've had him on. Really, really good guy, and we highly recommend his stuff.
And he's the guy who will do the level of research necessary to really debunk this
Bible
stuff.
Bible
thinker. Good call. So so that's a dude who's going to really actually go look at primary documents and stuff. So
you notice he had 169,000 subscribers, I think.
That's true. But I mean, we got You know, we got
7 likes right now,
Yeah.
man.
Take that,
7
Mike
likes.
Winger.
You know, if you haven't hit the like button, go ahead and hit that like button.
It's the last one of the year, and we're going to put Kevin's job back on the line again, like we did a month ago. Kevin, how did you feel about that when your job was on the line? What Isaac set a bar of 20 likes?
He's probably been praying to leave this place for a long time, man.
20 likes is what is required for Kevin to keep his
He's got
job.
a sense of loyalty. That's the only reason why he's still here.
That's true. You know, Kevin worked here not even as an employee. He just worked here for free while he had a I was going to say a real job. Anyway, okay, so here's the deal. Long story short, Saturnalia is a very prominent Roman holiday that's around at the time that Christianity is growing.
Naked caroling.
Giving of gifts, although I think they were more like gag gifts, it looks like. So here's the question. Is Saturnalia what we're actually celebrating on Christmas?
No.
No, it's not. Now, is it possible that Saturnalia or any other pagan holiday is, in fact, the reason why we picked December 25th?
Possibly, yeah.
It's definitely possible.
Christians have a way, historically, even to today, even today we do this. Well, what we do is we see something that culture has, and rather than just try to destroy it, if there's some way that we could almost baptize it,
Right.
and make it a way to communicate the gospel, then we'll use that.
Yes.
Now, you can argue to what degree does that become wrong? Have you crossed a line?
Right.
But I mean, like, Christian music has done this, where it's like there's a style that's popular, and then the Christian artist sort of mimics that style. They didn't create their own genre,
Right.
but they immediately jump on it.
Missionaries do this all the time. If you move into a culture and you find out there's a really significant day, of course you're going to try to capitalize on that for the sake of spreading the gospel. And it doesn't necessarily mean that it's like this devious thing. It's really subversive and brilliant, actually, especially even just on the level of okay, it's you and your family. What are we going to do on Saturnalia now that we believe in Jesus? We don't want to, the kids are going to be so sad if it's like, hey, we don't do the Saturnalia stuff anymore because we don't believe in the god Saturn.
So think of it like this. There's a holiday that's celebrated on winter solstice, where it's the darkest day of the year, and it's going to start to turn. The sun's going to start to come out, and it's going to be brighter. And also, let's say there's some deities associated with that, because many cultures have a story or a narrative where a deity dies and then comes back to life. So they die in the winter, and then they come back in the spring, and that's done yearly again and again. And every year you have to expect this deity to die and go away for the winter and then come back in the spring. So the Christian shows up and says, oh, you believe all of those things. Well, I need to tell you that there's one person who died and resurrected, but he'll never die again. He doesn't go away for the winter. He doesn't go away and you wait for him to return in the spring, because he actually rose bodily.
Right.
We don't have to worry about him dying again. And oh, by the way, we do believe that in the darkest of times, when humanity was at its darkest moment, the Son of God, the true light of the world, came into our place, into our condition, in order that he might save us. So you're taking those narrative elements where they overlap with the Christian story and using them to better communicate the gospel. So it's not a copying or a ripping off. It's actually using what narrative elements are available within that culture to communicate gospel truth.
Yeah, and it couldn't have said that better. And that doesn't mean, by the way, that is necessarily even what happened. Saturnalia, again, it's not December 25th. Yeah. And there's another really good explanation. You've probably heard this one too, Isaac, but there was a Jewish belief in the first century, in the Second Temple period, that a prophet died on the same day that they were conceived. Mm-hmm. And so, long story short, if you do the math, based on the day that Jesus died, and you do the 9 months calculation, roughly, his birthday would be roughly December 25th. So that's entirely possible also. Yeah. There's no primary source that says that, though.
Or the Christians could have just gaining dominance and said, we're celebrating Jesus' birthday at this time.
Right. Now. And one of the points that Mike Winger makes that I love is, at the end of the day, okay, maybe, so let's say we did that. Let's say it was the day of a pagan festival 2,000 years ago. Which one are we celebrating today? Yeah. So who won?
If the goal was to Christianize the nation, who won?
We did it. Good
what
job,
are you singing
everybody.
about when you sing Hark the Herald Angels?
Yeah,
you singing
and
Saturn?
That's one of the coolest things. I mean, during Christmas, dude, you'll be in a coffee shop or like a mall or something, and you'll hear someone say, "O come Emmanuel and ransom Israel." You know what I mean? Or, "Joy to the world, the Lord has come, let earth receive her king." You're like, we are singing theologically rich, gospel-centered Christian songs in the midst of a secular nation. So it's really powerful. And again, the problem is in the rhetoric. It is not accurate to say, you actually know Christmas has nothing to do with Christianity. Like, no. It doesn't matter what the date was 2,000 years ago. Christmas today, in the year 2020, has a lot to do with Christianity. Because go ask the average person on the street, why do we celebrate Christmas? And they're not going to say because of Saturn.
Yeah.
They're going to say because of the birth of Jesus. So it reveals some ignorance about how history works, how holidays work, frankly. Okay, on that note, Christmas trees. Are Christmas trees pagan?
Absolutely.
Okay, cool. Next question.
Next question.
Throw up that Christmas tree meme, Kev. Oh, by the way, I should say several people have said they liked the picture just for Kevin to keep his job, but we still need 3 more. Jacob says he's only doing it for Kevin. I got a text message from RJ Campos saying he liked, and I'm assuming it's just for Kevin. So Kevin's job is on the line, everybody. 3 more likes. So this meme says, "You see, son, we buy a Christmas tree to celebrate an ancient pagan tradition stolen by Christians." So again, that's an assertion. You want to throw up the other one. So that's from a non-Christian. Here's a Christian take on Christmas trees. They're quoting Jeremiah 10:2-4, which it's hard to read on there, but I'll pull it up on here. We won't be able to put it on the screen, but I will pull it up. So let's take the Christian claim first because it's the easiest one to debunk. This is actually not that uncommon of a belief. Tyler, who we had on a couple weeks ago, who grew up Jehovah's Witness, talked about how Jehovah's Witnesses look at this verse, and many conservative Christians also do. They say the Bible forbids the use of Christmas trees, and they quote this
Jeremiah 10:2-4, man.
Jeremiah 10. He says, "This is God speaking through Jeremiah." Do you have something you wanted to preface it with?
Kevin got to 20.
Oh, nice! Hey, round of applause for Kevin. Yeah.
Those. By the way, you can remove those by clicking on the like button again.
Yeah, you could take them back.
You can't take it back.
Please don't, though, because if Kevin loses his job, it's going to be really hard to do this show. All right, Jeremiah 10:2. "Learn not the way of the nations, nor be dismayed at the signs of the heavens, because the nations are dismayed at them. For the customs of the peoples are vanity. A tree from the forest is cut down and worked with an axe by the hands of a craftsman. They decorate it with silver and gold. They fasten it with hammer and nails so that it cannot move." Whoa.
Yeah.
That sounds like Christmas trees. So here we have, so clearly in Jeremiah's time, which is a long time ago, people are, Georgia M wants to just say that she likes Kevin 3 times. People are clearly.
Sure sounds like a Christmas tree to me, man.
So they're chopping down a tree. They're decorating it with silver and gold. They fasten it so that it can't move. The Bible just said, don't do that because the pagan nations do it. And so this is just a very simple lesson in hermeneutics. On the surface, that sounds like it might be about a Christmas tree. You can make the argument that even that is going to be, you're doing some serious anachronisms to just assume it's a Christmas tree on this ancient text. But all you have to do is what we said in all of the How to Read the Bible videos, which is just keep reading. So that was verse 4. We'll read verse 5. "Their idols are like scarecrows in a cucumber field, and they cannot speak. They have to be carried, for they cannot walk. Do not be afraid of them, for they cannot do evil, neither is it in them to do good." Now it goes on and on. "They are both stupid and foolish. The instruction of idols is but wood. Beaten silver is brought from Tarshish and gold from Uphaz. They are the work of the craftsman in the hands of the goldsmith. Their clothing is violet and purple. They are all the work of skilled men." Now you could go on, but here's the point. It's very clearly describing the creation of wooden idols.
Yes.
It's not about chopping down a tree and putting stuff in its branches. And you know this because there are polemics against idols in the prophets all over the place. And they say things like, my favorite one is the one where it just says, hey, they go out and chop down, somebody goes out and chops down a tree. They take half of the wood and make an idol out of it. They take the other half of the wood and they cook dinner on it. And you want to pray to the other half? Like, what's wrong with you? And so, yeah, it's really, it's very, very clear if you read this. This is not about putting up a full tree in your house and decorating it.
And if you happen to be worshiping the tree that you cut down and decorated, you are committing a parallel sin to Jeremiah 10:2-4.
Right.
So don't worship the Christmas
Yes.
tree.
The problem is not the decoration of a tree. It's worshiping
Ancient
an
people
idol.
built fires in high places to worship deities, but you can build a fire on the top of the mountain that you climbed up to from your backpacking trip.
Right.
But if you start to offer up that smoke to Thanos,
Yeah.
there's a problem.
The thing people don't know that Thanos is just the Greek word for death. Perla says she only uses fake trees. I'm assuming for this reason, to avoid accidental idolatry. Hey, Zakia, good to hear from you. Loving this Theology Thursday. Thank you. And then Laura says, I love this topic, especially being married into a family that never grew up celebrating it. I'm going to go back and listen to the beginning, so I'll be 30 minutes behind. Hey, we'll see you when you get back into the future, Laura. Good to hear from you. So yeah, that's a really quick one. And it's just another example of something we talk about all the time, which is like a verse out of context. Dan Kimball has the great quote where he says, don't read Bible verses. Mm-hmm. And he means it like he's saying it in a tongue-in-cheek way. Obviously, he thinks you should read the Bible, but he's saying don't just read verses. So understand the argument.
Dan Kimball's book comes out in like a week, and it's called How Not to Read the Bible.
I cannot wait to
so
read
we
it.
can recommend that. So congratulations, Dan. That was a book a long time coming, working on it. It's like 300-something pages, How Not to Read the Bible.
And it's going to be all about the kind of stuff that people who watch the show love, which is like, maybe we'll bring him on when it comes out.
Yeah,
it's all about problem passages, things that people have a hard time with in the Bible. How, the kind of famous idea that you can become an atheist by reading the Bible when you read about violent conquests and other difficult stuff. So highly recommend that book. I'm recommending it even though I haven't read it yet, which is probably pretty cool.
Well, we know him. He's a good dude.
Isaac's probably read it. You can pre-order it. Now, the other thing, so that's the Christian case against Christmas trees. There's also the kind of pagan case that, hey, these were connected to the Roman cult of Asherah. This is sort of like a god that had these wooden poles. That's true, for sure. And so you will see, this is another thing like Mithras, you will see over and over and over again, people just saying, well, pagans around the time of Yule used to cut down trees and put them in their houses as part of pagan celebrations. And so one more time, that is not attested to in one single primary source of any pagan religion, meaning it's just not true. Or if it's true, there's no evidence of it. So people just say, hey, we used to chop down trees, and it was a pagan thing that they'd put them in their house as part of your pagan solstice celebration. Show me one source that says that happened. There is not one that I'm aware of. So again, it's just another example of, hey, do your research. There's actually Christmas trees are, so the part of the claim is this Asherah kind of ancient Near East thing, but there's another claim that it's like Germanic pagan stuff, because Christmas trees do have their roots in Germany, but we don't really see any evidence of them starting anytime before the 18th century, which is very recent. That's like the modern world. Yeah. And there's actually, this is also not attested to in primary sources, so I'm not saying it's true, but there are like traditions that say that Martin Luther is the first person who did it. And it was actually based on his Christian kind of reflections on seeing trees and thinking of the new year and stuff. So all that to say, there is absolutely nothing that links Christmas trees to any kind of pagan cultic practices. So rock and roll. And again,
don't worship them.
Don't worship them. That shouldn't be that hard.
No. Now I would say that there's a way in which it does parallel, in that you can become so materialistic in your understanding of Christmas that the trees and the present become the focal point rather than Jesus coming into the world. So in that way, you can actually miss the mark to such a degree that, dude, you're blowing it.
It is idolatry.
The point.
And you have to be careful. I mean, it's very easy to accidentally teach your kids that is what Christmas is about.
Yeah.
And at that point, your danger is not that you have actually been participating in an ancient pagan tradition. It's that you have accidentally morphed Christmas into a modern pagan tradition.
Exactly. That's right. That's right.
And that's what a lot of Christians are actually in danger of. So when Christmas is all about,
the greater threat is materialistic modern hedonism, not ancient paganism.
Yeah. And I'll say it again. Any links that Christmas has to ancient pagan traditions, I'm fine with them. 100% fine with them, because they're just evidence of Christians subverting existing holidays in order to advance the gospel, and they did it incredibly well. The entire Western world now celebrates
If the Christians who came out of who went into Nicaea with the scars of persecution literally still on their body happened to use an element of paganism to preach the gospel, it's probably not a big deal.
And
I mean, these people literally came, some of them had missing arms still.
Yeah.
They were faithful Christians trying to preach in their context.
Paul does the same thing in Acts 17. Missionaries have done it for all of Christian history. No problem. All right, let's change gears because we actually, that took a long time, but I want to try to get to a couple other interesting things. Question came in from Jacob Serpa. He says, can you talk about the star and the Magi and astrology, please? And Jacob's talking about the three wise men, or the three kings as they're known. Wait. Side note, because I agree with Georgia M. She says they are pretty and they smell good. That is reason enough to have a Christmas tree.
I really do like the smell of Christmas trees.
It's nice. My daughter's really excited.
Just don't worship them.
Don't worship. That's, you know what, if there's one thing you learned on Theology Thursday tonight, we need that the more you know NBC like sound clip, Kevin, so we go, hey, Christians, don't worship your Christmas tree.
I'm positive some ancient pagan culture sacrificed some turkey bird and cooked it and brought it in and ate it, but doesn't mean Thanksgiving is rooted in ancient paganism. So you just have to be careful. There's some stuff that's probably too far or too close to something, but be careful.
And if one of your friends wants to get snappy about the pagan origins of Christmas, all you have to do is politely ask them to demonstrate that that's true in some way. So what Jacob's asking about are the three wise men. They're also called the three kings, and there's quite a few misunderstandings about them. Mm-hmm. And he's asking about the star and astrology. So what's the kind of general deal here? What's Jacob getting at?
I was occupied looking at what Kevin was typing. He's just putting a link into the book. I thought he was trying to tell me something.
Oh yeah, no worries.
So you were talking about the three kings, and kind of we say, but the Greek word is magoi, magos in the singular, I think. And
what's a magos?
It's a magi. It's like
not a king, right?
It's not a king for sure. These are people who looked up at the stars, and they're not Jewish. They're from a far off land, and they're seeing something in the sky that's drawing them to the birth of a Jewish king.
Yeah,
which
awesome.
is so easy to miss, but that is awesome. It's in a time where people are extremely tribal. They're extremely focused on their people in their land. At the beginning of the Christmas story, at the beginning of the gospel of Jesus, is this idea that God did a miracle to bring people who were far off, not of his people Israel, into the birth of his son.
Yeah. I mean, that's the point that you don't want to miss about the three wise men. They're in Matthew's gospel, by the way. If you want to read the story, it's in Matthew 2. And the main point of that story is that outsiders from the Gentile world are brought to worship the king. There's a bunch of misunderstandings that are fairly common, like they're not there. Sorry to your nativity set, but they're not there.
This part's going to be this can be painful.
Yeah, they weren't there the day that Jesus was born, guys.
They missed the birthday.
They're
not kings.
They're not kings. We don't know how many there were.
They may not have been wise.
They may not have been wise, although, I mean, that's what you expect out of Magoi. Yeah. But it doesn't say there's three of them either. And it's interesting. The Western church tradition says there's three, and they even have names. I don't remember what they are. It's like Gaspar and Melchior and Bubba. It's the third one, I think. But in the Eastern tradition, there's 12. Did you know that?
I didn't.
So in the Eastern church tradition, there's 12. The Bible doesn't say. People assume three fairly reasonably because there's three gifts that they give and stuff. But it's interesting. We know some other magoi in the Bible. That's the Greek translation of the Old Testament title of what Daniel and his three friends are in the court of Nebuchadnezzar. And this is interesting. There's a rabbit trail you could run down. The only thing we know about them for sure is what's in the Bible, and it's very vague. They are magoi, whatever that means in the first century, from the east, who follow a sign in the heavens. They follow a star to Bethlehem based on a prophecy that they know for some reason. That's literally all we know. And they recognize him as the king of Israel, and they give him gifts. But it's really interesting. And Jacob's question was about astrology, because he's going, okay, so are these astrologers from the east who are using pagan astrological stuff and that's what leads them, or is there something else going on? And we don't know for sure. The claim gets made a lot that these were Zoroastrians. Okay, Ed and Dina Bless say, when we set up our nativity set, we always put our wise men figurines way down the mantle to show they didn't get there for a long time.
Good.
That's awesome.
That's good.
That's a good way to handle that, Ed and Dina. Good job. And then you leave it out for 2 more years and then bring him over and you have a little toddler Jesus that comes out.
That's good. That's good.
Now
Mary says, just in time, change his baby's diaper.
Yeah, change his diaper. He's starting to talk and he's actually mouthing off a little bit.
Jesus never did that.
No, for sure. Actually, he did respect his parents. That's in the Bible. Now, a magi, from what we know, was some kind of combination, and it's unclear because it changes throughout history, but it's some combination of wise men / advisor to a royal person, maybe. That's what Daniel and his friends were. There is definitely overlap with kind of magic rituals and stuff like that, and kind of priestly jobs, depending on when and where. And then what they would have thought of as our equivalent of science, although it of course wasn't called that, which is, some kind of astronomy, astrology combination. Yeah. And in Zoroastrianism, which is a very, very old Persian religion that's still around today, Magi is a formal title of a priestly office. And so there's much made of that, basically saying, no, these are Zoroastrian priests, because those did exist at this time in history, which is very interesting. Again, there's no proof of that. So there's kind of 2 options, and they're both, in my mind, honestly, feel free to correct me if you disagree, but they're both equally cool to me. Because one option is this is an example of God working outside of the Bible, which we know he did. God is involved in the world, in history. And so
people have visions of Jesus. And
that still
Christians.
happens today.
Yeah.
So it could be God in some way revealing this completely outside of the rest of his plan with his covenant people, Israel. It's also entirely possible that they were aware of Jewish messianic prophecy in that kind of area to the east. It could have even come down from Daniel and his 3 friends, that you have this prominent Jewish leader who is very significant in Babylon just, a few hundred years before the birth of Jesus. It's entirely possible that they're...
whose work was really emphasize this coming messianic figure who would destroy the evil kingdoms of the world.
And so think about this. It's kind of cool. Again, we're speculating, but it's entirely possible. That's the classic Joe Rogan phrase. Entirely possible, meaning I have no idea if it's true or not. But it is entirely possible that you have Daniel, who is the kind of chief of the Chaldean Magi. So he is over all of this class of person 500 years before Jesus was born. And because these are part of that kind of tradition of Magi, they have the prophecies of Daniel that they've held on to. And maybe some of them are just into it and kind of keep up with it. And through some combination of watching the sky and God revealing things, they're brought to Bethlehem to see Jesus. Very, very cool. And it just it happens in one chapter in one book of the Bible. Yeah. But it's Matthew is not doing this on accident. Matthew wants you to see God brought in outsiders of every type that you've got.
Yeah, and pretty significant because Matthew's gospel is a Jewish gospel in that it speaks in the language of the Jewish people of the first century world. Its emphasis is on Old Testament prophecies being fulfilled. It's reaching Jewish people, but he wants that audience to know at the beginning of his story.
Yeah, that God is not only interested in Israel. And it's right there in chapter 2. Super cool. So unfortunately, Jacob, we can't do a whole lot except for speculate. But it is very interesting. And I have zero theological problem with the idea of God, again, using these people's practices in order to reveal something and to bring them to the true king. It's not the same as a universalism or perennialism or subjectivism that says it's all the same. God is using this to bring them to the one true king.
Yeah.
It's not the same as saying whatever their Babylonian practices were fine. It's the goal here is you're coming to see the real king of the world. All right, we've got 10 minutes, and I do want to take this last question, but it is a spicy one, potentially. So if anyone is watching with, this is going to sound like it's going to be inappropriate, but that's not the case. If you're watching with children, we're going to talk about a certain chimney sliding, red suit wearing character. So I'm going to give you like 10 seconds to pause this, unless you want what we'll call spoilers.
Yeah, we're talking about Spider-Man and his
Spider-Man
real identity. So
yeah, spoiler alert. Yeah, okay, so pause it, watch it later if you've got kids that you don't want hearing potentially childhood ruining things about Santa. Joey Rivera wants to know, is the Yule log pagan? That I would have to look at that one specifically, but off the top of my head, Joey, I think it actually might be.
There's overlap.
I think there is.
I believe there was some type of celebration with the Yule log type of thing. And again, Christians might have accommodated it.
Yeah. And Yule is for sure a Germanic kind of pagan-rooted set of traditions.
Yeah. So again, if you're doing something in a pagan way,
right.
I mean, the world is very old, filled with many diverse religious practices. You can find overlap with pretty much lighting candles are used in pagan ceremonies.
Totally. And the Yule log, I don't do a Yule log, so I might be wrong about this, but I don't think the Yule log has any Christian symbolism anyway. So
that's probably more of a secular kind of like chestnuts roasting on an open fire.
I think the Yule log has some kind of like this year's over, this year's beginning symbolism, which like, again, that in and of itself is not bad, but that one isn't even co-opted by Christians. The Yule log I don't think is a Christian thing.
Make the kids leave the room.
Yeah, send the kids out. So we got a question from Ryan Snyder.
Kevin, go ahead and walk outside for a bit.
Oh, yeah, Kevin. This is going to be very disillusioning for you. Jacob wants to know, what is a Yule log? You're going to have to go and Google that because I don't even know.
We've got time to answer all your questions, Jacob.
I think it's a log. I think it's the bottom of your Christmas tree and then you burn it the next Christmas or something. I don't know. I don't do it.
It's pagan.
It's pagan. I don't do that stuff.
I'm a Christian.
What if that's when someone tuned in? Like, I guess the answer was yes.
I'm happy they tuned in.
Do you think, this is a question from Ryan Snyder, do you think teaching children, I love the way he phrased this, the myth of Santa Claus on December 25th, and then he says some more stuff about it, is dangerous to future Christians' understanding of the gospel message? So is teaching Santa to kids bad if you're a Christian? Let's do the short answer and then the long answer. What's your short answer?
Possibly.
Oh, that's very nuanced of you.
It's possible.
I'm going to say, and I'll borrow from Paul and say, I and not the Lord. But I would say yes to this question personally, but that's an opinion. That's not a clear, obvious yes. I'll give kind of my short take and then you can as well. John Piper spoke on this and it was really, really well done, I thought. And his point was basically, he wasn't focused on anything bad about Santa. It was more that his point was anything that is a false story that you're using to take up attention that could be taken up by a true and better story is a distraction at best and a danger at worst. Because this is the time of year when we are celebrating a key pivotal moment in the best story in all of human history. And it happens to be true. And his question was basically just, why would you take up time and attention and focus on a story that's not true and not as good as the true one that we're supposed to be telling? Now, again, I spoke too strongly. I don't think it's like a sin to talk about Santa, but the caution I would give is that if that starts to become the main focus of you and your kids to the detriment of the true story that you could be telling, I think that's a problem.
Yeah, and to your point, you're saying if it does this, by nature, the way we do Santa Claus in this country, it will do that.
Right.
Because, who is the person that gives the presents? That's what it comes down to. It's like, well, if you have a 5-year-old, whoever gives them ice cream, that's their favorite person in that moment.
Yeah, and as a selfish human, I want credit for that, first of all. I already got a text saying, bah humbug to my Santa opinion, which I like.
Yeah. So whoever gives the present, whoever gives the ice cream, that's what kids are going to be most excited about. Do I care if Santa Claus is in your Christmas celebration? No, I don't care if Rudolph, Santa Claus, any of that stuff.
Frosty the Snowman.
But if you set up Christmas to be about the presents and the one who gives the presents, and even if that's not your intent, I'm telling you, if you make it, kids will make it about the presents. That's what they're excited about. And then the one who is the giver of these things is not praise God from whom all blessings flow and something else. And then, by the way, they get told isn't real at a certain age. You're in danger. But is there? And I don't have any problem with having a Santa Claus. Like if we were to do a church event and there was a reindeer and a Santa Claus or something. Again, it's not like, well, Santa Claus is evil and pagan. It's how you go about doing it. And my bigger concern, and it's to what we touched earlier, is that Christmas in general has become so materialistic. It's all about what we get. And then the one who is the giver to the children is not Jesus. Again, praise God from whom all blessing flows, the doxology. You're getting them to unknowingly love him in that holiday more than Jesus.
Yeah.
So there's a risk.
There's a risk, and I think a couple of the commenters pointed out. So Perla said, "How do we explain to kids that you lied to them? Does this affect trust?" And then Jacob before that said that learning there was no Santa gave the child version of him a faith crisis. I know many people, that sounds like a joke, but I know many people who had a legitimate, it was either a faith crisis of some kind as a kid or a trust in their parents issue as a result of, and you really have to, as a parent, you have to think about this stuff. You're telling them God is real. Jesus is real. Even though you can't see it, it's real. I promise you. Mm-hmm. And then you're also telling them on the other hand, Santa's real. I promise you, here's all this evidence. Again, I'm not trying to be alarmist. I'm not a weird fundamentalist or something.
Yeah, but evaluate he just said and weigh it and make a decision.
Yeah. And my personal recommendation, I'm sure this is what we'll do. My kids are pretty little. Last year, my daughter thought all the Santa statues were Noah because the Noah in one of her Bible books looked like Santa. Yeah. And so she'd see them and she'd be like, there's another Noah. And I'd be like, that'll work for this year. But what we'll probably do is say, this is a fun thing that there's this fun story about, just like, again, Rudolph is a fun story. Frosty the Snowman is a fun story. Yeah. Not a huge deal. So again, I came out a little spicy. But ultimately my prayer would be this, that you take advantage. So let's say Christians did co-opt pagan holidays to create the most famous holiday ever, and it's all about Jesus, and you as a Christian have an opportunity to have a whole month, and then one particular day of that month, this is all about Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith, the most important person in human history. And I would just say, with intention, order the things in your family life.
Yeah, that's a good way
accordingly. So it doesn't mean you can't have Santa, but order it correctly. And so, that doesn't mean you can't have a big inflatable Santa. Although Chris Grimes says he once saw a Santa Claus hand out chick tracts. I don't even know what that means. Chick tracts are they were evangelistic tools used in especially the 80s and 90s that were like little comic books that would say, it would have a story about someone dying and going to hell. That's like the dramatic versions, but they were meant to be evangelistic tools. So this was a subversive Christian Santa. I mean, dude, when I was the campus pastor at Incarnate Faith, the campus we used to have, we had a Santa come to one of our holiday boutiques. Again, spoiler alert if there are kids watching, but it was Zach Buffum. And also James Hankins.
Clearly pagan.
My favorite thing about when Zach was...
clearly pagan.
When he was Santa, he had the best line because the kids would ask him for their gifts. And Zach, who's, he's a thoughtful guy, and he's probably thinking I can't say yes to this. What if they don't get it? So he would just say, I will do my best in that voice. And every Christmas, I make sure I say that to Zach. I will do my best.
Yeah, you don't want me to dress up as Santa, because if the kids ask if this is real, I'm going to pull down their beard and say, this is all a sham.
Yeah.
It's fake. It's a house of lies.
Yeah. Now, Zakiya has a great suggestion, which is tie Santa Claus to the story of the real St. Nicholas. And that's a great idea. Do some research on who St. Nicholas was and what he did and how it relates to Santa, and maybe have that be a way that you tell the story.
The Charlie Brown Christmas movie, as Joey said, that's legit.
It is, dude. That'll make you cry when Linus tells the Christmas story.
Because for those who are paying close attention,
this is semiotics.
For those who don't know, I'm still working on a degree in something called semiotics, and this is semiotics. But Linus always needs his comfort blanket. That's what right word to call it, like a comfort blanket.
Yeah. It's like his
crutch.
Security blanket.
It's a security blanket. But when that man recites the Christmas story, that's the only time he puts it down. He doesn't need the security blanket.
He finishes the Christmas story and he drops the blanket. And if that doesn't move you,
it moves me, honestly.
It's powerful. My wife just texted me, by the way, and said that tonight my daughter thought that a picture of Santa on a sleigh was Noah riding on a boat. So maybe I'm gonna get another year out of this one.
So good.
But yeah, so guys, again, at the end of the day, this is an incredible opportunity where our entire culture is focusing on the birth of Jesus. And again, it's not like they're focusing on a million other things, but that's what this holiday is about. However it started, that's what it's about now. And so don't miss that opportunity. And I would just say, think consciously about how you're going to engage with, things like Santa.
And when you see people dressed up as Santa, just go over to them and tell them, it's all lies. I know your secret.
There was a good tweet where a guy talked about he looked at some of the theological debates in church councils at the time that St. Nicholas was actually alive and said, you just go up to a Santa in a costume and ask him one of those questions like, homusios or homoousios.
Yes.
And if he doesn't know the answer, he's not
then
the
he's
real
an imposter.
St. Nicholas.
He's an imposter. St. Nick would have known sound Trinitarian doctrine.
He would have. All right, we have clearly gone long enough. Hey, thank you all so much for a lot of months and a lot of weeks. We're going to take a month off, and we'll see you back in January. That's not what you meant to do, I don't think. That's what he meant to do. God bless you. Thanks, guys. Have a great Christmas.